So we will just be asking, what is Sanbo Zen? And we'll find out what that question means as we go. So for starters, would you just, riff on what are some of the characteristic features of Sanbo Zen?
Yeah, this lay tradition, Sanbo Zen, that is the root tradition at Mountain Cloud. It's got its character from its genesis, which we'll be talking about, but it's a combination of two sort of strains or houses of Zen school called Soto and Rinzai, or we could just say just sitting is more of the Soto tradition, or Zazen, and koan training, which comes to us from the Rinzai line. Sanbo Zen is really characterized also by its open tent. So anyone can come and join in this practice from any religious tradition, from no religious orientation. There are roots in Sanbo Zen, of course, from Zen Buddhism, and so we draw on that when we give talks, and some of the traditions certainly come from that, but one need not identify as a Buddhist to be deeply engaged in this practice. Yeah, we could say more. This comes from a tradition that started in the 50s, 1950s in Japan, when Harada Daiun Roshi was a Soto monk, and he felt dissatisfied with the kind of acuity of practice. He felt that it had lost its sense of awakening, that there was even a tradition in the Soto line at that time that if you just believed that Shakyamuni Buddha had been awakened, that was enough, so the practice had lost its depth and clarity, he felt. So he was, fully authorized in the Soto school, that lineage, but he found his way to a Rinzai teacher and did the complete training, and so was also authorized in that Rinzai line. He remained a Soto monk all his life, but then he had a student, Yasutani Roshi, who had a similar sense of also Soto monk, and just felt that the real depth of practice had been lost in that tradition at that time. So like Harada, Yasutani then did the whole koan training, that curriculum, and he really was the one then who began what was then known as the Sanbo Kyodan school. He opened a small zendo in Tokyo and began teaching, drawing people, lay people were welcome, and also people from all different backgrounds, traditions, men and women. So Yasutani was already taking a step to open up Zen to anyone who wished to practice it. He was quite intent on teaching Zazen, koans, and helping people do this path of awakening. So really, that was quite emphasized in this line. And Yasutani then had a student, Yamada Kon Roshi, who was the teacher of my teacher, my first teacher, Ruben Habito. And Kon Roshi became, well, he's quite well known in the West now because of this book, The Three Pillars of Zen, that Philip Kapleau compiled. And he had a very great awakening experience that is recorded in that book. And Kon Roshi had a big hand in working together with Philip Keplo to create the contents of that book. But Kon Roshi ended up together with his wife, who was deeply supportive of this, herself a medical doctor. They built a zendo in their small family compound in Kamakura and opened the doors wide. So if you look at the list of his many, many Dharma heirs, they include many Westerners who have then gone out in Europe, Hawaii, rest of the United States, opened zendos, spread this Dharma, shared it. And Kon Roshi also, from his master Yasutani, inherited this zazen, just sitting, koan training, and awakening. Yeah. So grateful for this lineage and its openness that continues to this day.
I have so many curiosities now. One is, one hears that American Zen, maybe even more than European Zen, has an outsized influence from Sanbo Kyodan and Sanbo Zen, even in lineages that don't currently belong to the Sanbo school officially. So there's some way in which maybe like American Zen students, what they take to be Zen has already a huge amount of Sanbo flavor in it, whereas it has a smaller influence in present-day Japan, where there are all these huge monastic institutions of Soto and Rinzai and such. So I guess, yeah, just one curiosity is what forest are we not seeing for the trees? What are some of these flavors, that are really pretty innovative,
Of course, everywhere that Zen goes, it adapts and changes. And that has certainly happened in the United States. If you look at the lineage chart from Kon Roshi, it includes Robert Aitken Roshi, who planted the Diamond School, the Diamond Sangha, and also Maizumi Roshi, the White Plum lineage tradition. And already there you can see with Maizumi and White Plum, they ordain and they wear robes. And in the Diamond Sangha, it's a lay tradition, but they wear robes. And Philip Keplo also practiced that. So even though he came here and his students built Mountain Cloud, but he would wear a robe, and they encouraged that for sesshin, for sitting. People would wear robes. That's not the case in Sanbo Zen. And different sanghas around the United States might be more or less formal. Other traditions, along with robes, which obviously we're not in, chanting, bowing, offering incense. Yeah, all of those things, I think, have become, well, more or less formal, depending on the sort of flavor of the community. So at Mountain Cloud, we're always, this is a bit in flux, I would say, just trying to see what really works and speaks to people. So we do a little bit of chanting here. If we have sesshin, there might be a little bit more chanting, our formal retreat. We do, when I come in to give a Dharma talk or a teisho, I offer incense. At the altar, I turn it upside down because a few members here are allergic. So I don't, anywhere else I've gone, you just have to have incense, So there's also a kind of, I think the flavor here at Mountain Cloud is a very warm welcome and wanting people to feel, support for their practice, feel like this can be their home. So we don't really have a dress code. We don't require people to wait if they arrive late. But there's still a very an atmosphere also of shared silence, a respect for the silence. I feel that very much in the Zendo. But we haven't come to it with a sort of the formality. We also don't use here the Kyosaku, or some places call it the encouragement stick, which is a vital part of Zen in Asia still. So when I go to sesshin, I actually like this, but you know, at some point, a couple times each day, someone or two people will go to the altar, and there are these long bamboo sticks, and they have a little ritual, and then they go around silently, just walking behind each person. And if you wish to be to receive the stick, the encouragement stick, you put your hands together, and then they'll go whack whack on one side and whack whack on the other. Yeah, that is quite different. I once had a chance to sit with the monks in a Rinzai temple in Japan, and so we were on platforms facing in, and the sit was an hour that I was invited to attend. And, so settling in, eyes lowered, and at some point during the sit, the person who was, we call Jiki, or monitor, slid down off the platform and picked up at the altar this very large, very heavy Kyosaku, and just walked along. And he didn't strike, that's not a great word, but he didn't give the stick to each person. He somehow would, just walking by, sense if somebody maybe wasn't so alert, or I don't know what he was quite sensing to make him just turn and face that monk. And the monk would, kind of lean forward, and it was a very loud whack. So at that point, I'm sitting in zazen, but looking around. So, that's just kind of a one, not only a practice, but it lends itself to a little more austere atmosphere in the Zendo. Although when I go to Europe or Canada for sesshin, and they do offer this encouragement stick, the Kyosaku, it feels like an act of love and care. And I've never come away with welts or anything. It's, which I read about in earlier times was really an issue. Yeah, so maybe also, in that Rinzai monastery, for example, every one of those monks was in full lotus. There was just a level of formality. We encourage people to sit in a way that works for each one's body. So we have, zafus and benches and all kinds of support cushions and chairs, and even ways you can sit on the floor but have back support. And I think that's just another way that Zen in the West has, or certainly here, tried to be more inviting. And it doesn't have to hurt to sit. You know, it can be part of practice to sort of have a little pain in the knees or the back or the shoulders, and you know, just sort of breathing into that and seeing how it can ease and dissolve, or the sensation can change. But we don't recommend sitting in a way that will actually hurt a person's body. No way. It's a full body practice. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This is the gift.
Mm. And you know, like that spirit of welcoming, which you've named a bunch of the practical ways that we let people feel not intimidated, you know, held by a practice with some discipline and shared silence. But, you know, it seems to me that that spirit of welcome as you are goes deep, you know. When I first walked in the doors at Mountain Cloud, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt something pretty different than other Zen centers and other Zen centers I'd been at. And it seemed to have something to do with like, oh, it's not just lip service to the spirit of each person's organic expression of the Dharma, organic expression of who they are is like affirmed, you know. And that seems maybe continuous with the Sanbo spirit of welcoming lay people, welcoming men and women, welcoming people who practice different religions. So just, I think, say about it, it seems like that's a deep strain in the, you know, grain.
Thank you, Kieran. That was nicely said. Yeah, I often say, and it springs from that wellspring that you're naming, each one's presence is a gift. And we really feel that in sitting. Even if it's just a few people in the Zendo, and the quality of that sitting, yeah, we're all supporting one another all the time. And, you know, at the same time that we're giving this, we're also just receiving it. So it's beautiful part of the practice. I remember still the first session that I led together with Henry Shukman at Mountain Cloud back in the first week of March 2020. And I think we alternated the talks. So on the first day, I offered this talk on the Koan Mu, which is the tradition that we have received and continue at every session, every retreat. And before I spoke, as we were settling in, Henry invited everyone to just sit comfortably, gather around, get where you could see. That's not so unusual. But I began to talk. And it wasn't just this receptivity, but the energy that was coming back at me, this welcome that something shared was going on. Yeah, that was so striking. And I had never quite felt that depth of welcome in other places, but everywhere I've sat, I would have something very grateful and positive to say about that place.
Continuing perhaps with this theme of wide welcome, the Sanbo spirit, as I understand it, that one says awakening at one depth or another is important, Kencho is important, and two, that it is accessible, even if you're a layperson, even if you practice another religion, etc. Would you, this characteristic of it, speak to?
Yes, and we can trace that back to actually Dogen Zenji, this 13th century remarkable Zen master, the most prolific ever. And he in his writing, fairly early on, went from using the words practice and enlightenment or awakening as two separate words. He put them together. So one way that he says that is practice is awakening, awakening is practice. So there's this understanding that from the beginning, even sitting down with monkey mind, you're already fully immersed in that which you are. We're soaking in the very thing we seek, and we're expressing it. So that appreciation then comes down to us, I think, with this hope that while there is certainly a deep invitation to taste and see this awake world, who we truly are, for yourself. We wouldn't say that, oh, if you don't have some kind of big opening experience, that there's not thoroughgoing value to this practice. So I would say there's less, certainly pressure, and perhaps less emphasis. It's incredible. It can be so life-changing, really transforming to have these openings, which certainly can happen more than once, often do, and often happen to people even before they find practice, but it's so helpful to have a practice, a community, a teacher, someone just to walk the way together when those experiences come, so there's a way to integrate the experience and carry on, personalize it, live it. But that would be another trait for sure that, Zen in the West and certainly at Mountain Cloud is not a pressure cooker for experience.
And what you just said about personalization calls to mind one of several what strike me as pretty brilliant distillations of Zen tradition that Sanbo has that maybe are, especially suited to teaching people who aren't in monasteries, aren't spending their whole lives in study and such. And I'm thinking of the 3 fruits of Zen, or what, Ruben Habito Roshi calls the ABCs of Zen. Yeah. Would you say something about that?
Happily. Yeah, I think this tradition of naming these 3 fruits, it may go back to Yasutani, Konroshi, certainly, but it is something that has come up through Sanbo Zen. And the fruits, the first one, we've inherited this sort of, there's some Japanese language, joriki is the word for it, but really this deepening, growing, you could say power of concentration, of presence, of openness, availability. My own teacher, Ruben Habito, liked to write concentration with a dash. So he would describe it as really living out of the center of one's being. And this is considered the first fruit of Zen. And that in itself, what an enriching practice. If, that's the fruit, that's plentiful. A lifetime practice. But out of that sort of tilling of the soil of our practice and deepening in this, sort of spacious, choiceless awareness that at the same time is really settled right where you are, then in some unguarded moment, and one never knows how. In fact, if there's any anticipation, that's sure to keep it away. But it could be a sound, a sight, a sensation. Yamada Konroshi was, it really started for him being on the train, coming home from work. They had this twice a day, hour-and-a-half train commute. And he was reading and came across a line by Dogen that he had read many times. Dogen writes, I came to see clearly that mind is no other than mountains, rivers, the great wide earth, the sun, the moon, and the stars. And he was just reading it, and suddenly it went in all the way. And his experience continued to unfold. But so that's kensho, or seeing your true nature. Reuben, when he calls ABCs, A is attention. And this is just one lovely formulation, but for that kensho, what he called B, he called belonging. But it's a little different from our usual sense of that, deep belonging that we might cultivate here together and can experience in the world. This is more like a thoroughgoing oneness. It's not just my intimacy with things, or my at-homeness in the world. But everywhere you turn, it's your own true face. That level. And this, as I said, can happen in myriads of ways. And when it does kind of fall on us, we fall open, in a sense. Then comes the third fruit of Zen, which is probably the most, I would say, challenging. And that is to personalize this, to live it out. When we come to this realization that the tradition names often as wisdom and compassion, how then shall I live? And that, of course, is lifelong. And along the way, with continued practice, one comes to see more and more clearly. And I really appreciated it some years ago when Yamada Rion Roshi, the son of Kon Yamada Kon Roshi, who is our current abbot, he often speaks of this personalization, this third fruit. And one day he just said, it's just a matter of seeing more and more clearly. And, that for me was a little more helpful than some language you hear about the perfection of one's character. It sort of naturally comes out of seeing who we really are. I also appreciated a comment I heard Rion Roshi say not long ago in a talk that he gave. And he said, the Zen school. And he said, well, it shouldn't be the Zen school. It should be called the human school. That's what this practice is about, just coming to see what it is to be human and then living that to the full.
All right, so several threads in what you've been talking about call to mind for me, and you can help me with this. Well known among Sanbo students, statement of the fundamental position of Sanbo Zen. Do you know it by heart?
Yeah, Kon Roshi wrote this, that the fundamental position of Sanbo Zen is to stand at the origin point of Shakyamuni Buddha's awakening through the Dharma gate of Dogen Zenji. So, one can see, first of all, how Konroshi, springing from his own awakening experience, would have felt very close to Dogen. But actually also, this combining of these two traditions of Soto and Rinzai goes back to Dogen. Um, he was credited with bringing Soto Zen from China to Japan, so the founder of that in Japan, kind of along with Keizan, another master. But, so Soto is just all about Zazen, just sitting. But when we read Dogen's, copious writings, they're full of koans. And he indeed even compiled a collection of 300 Shobogenzo koans. So I think that one has a sense he may have been working with them a little differently than we do now in koan training, perhaps. But it's very alive to read what he has to say about koans. And you can't avoid it if you read Dogen. But so Sanbo Zen traces its bringing together of these traditions back to Dogen rather than sort of through these different lines that get braided together. So it's thought to go that we inherit this right from Dogen. And we often hear, our Dharma talks will be threaded through with Dogen, and I think in most Sanbo Zen centers, there's an awareness among people who've been around for a while of Dogen's own experience. Born in 1200, as a very young child, his father died, and then a few years later, his mother died. And I think he was about 7 when that happened. Some people say 8, depending on how you count. But he had himself a very deep experience of impermanence, watching the smoke sort of waft up from his mother's funeral pyre. And he was brilliant, already writing poetry as a child and reading different languages. But he, from that experience, began his path to being a monk and giving his life to this practice and teaching. So we, in some centers where the introductory talks are a little more traditional than we do here, we certainly have introductory program, but Yasutani Roshi had prepared these series of talks, introductory talks, and one of them is about Dogen. So if you're in a more traditional Sanbo Zen setting, in another Sangha, you would go through this series of talks before, really saying, I want to join, I want to be a member of this Sangha, I want to work with this teacher. And yeah, one of those talks would be on Dogen. And one on the 3 fruits of Zen, which we do cover in our introductory session. And one of them that just comes to mind are the 3 fundamental attitudes for this practice, which are, I really appreciate this, great trust that, each one of us has the capacity to do this practice and to have this experience of homecoming. We're made for it. And there's also trust that, even though I can't see it, I know it's already here. And alongside that, like if trust is one leg of a three-legged stool of these fundamental attitudes, the next one is great doubt. That is so like Zen. And they work together. This is not, of course, all of our little doubts, am I doing this right? Can I really do this? Will I ever get this? All those things come up. Is this the path? Am I walking it? But those little doubts can dissolve in what the tradition calls great doubt. One way to taste that is to let ourselves doubt everything we think we know. And then you can see a taste of this choiceless awareness. There's just no purchase from which to judge anything. And the world starts to show itself in fresh ways. So the great trust, sometimes called great faith, great doubt, and the third leg of that stool is great perseverance. And, Kon Roshi said, if you have all three of those sort of functioning together, he felt it was inevitable that a person would, at some point, wake up. Wake up from the dream of separation. Wake up from the dream that everything is fixed. Wake up from this dream where we look at the world like with blinders on. And what about when that falls away?
So you spoke of Harada Roshi's sense of what needed revivifying in the Zen world that he found himself in. And then we spoke a little bit about how, certainly in the US, and maybe other parts of the West in some ways, somehow it seemed like the Sanbo offering and welcome found really fertile ground. So I'm just curious, as Sanbo has gone to different places and as it has gone on through the decades, what different needs has it found itself answering to? Needs of the world and the particular societies it finds itself in.
And that just threw me into what's going on in the world today, especially. I mean, we're seeing it profoundly in the United States, which of course affects everything, but we're seeing it around the world. There's a kind of a level of fear and anxiety and reactivity. And I'm so grateful for this practice at this particular time. And you can imagine how helpful it is to be able to experience stillness and to, in a sense, let our broken hearts really break open. This tenderizing practice right in the midst of so much suffering. And it's a way of addressing one's own suffering, this sort of tenderizing, allowing, receiving, giving, but also of then turning to the world and finding what we can each do. I often talk about finding what is ours to do. So that's an example, but think of it other times historically. And we may talk about that because Sanbo Zen has kind of some dark history too, around World War II with the Yasutani. But I think, so there's just the way that Zen can meet us in the time when we live, the circumstances of our lives. our own and our culture. There's also, Sanbo Zen, we keep talking about. Sanbo, by the way, just means three treasures. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, three treasures. And, to see how it's become, taken on this deep welcome. And, we're experiencing this here at Mountain Cloud and this community. But when I visit other places, it's got its own flavor, but they are deeply welcoming. And so we've talked a little bit about the ways that forms have maybe relaxed a little to suit sort of a current Western sensibility.
Including the stick, which you mentioned earlier.
Yes.
I gather that Yasutani Roshi says she had made extensive use of the
Yes.
stick.
So. Oh, yes. And shouting, we don't do that. Yeah. I mean, in part, it doesn't really suit people of our time. There's so much awareness now of trauma, and I wouldn't want to risk anyone being in the Zendo who may have been beaten at some point or abused in some way, and might receive that whack as a trigger for that. So I think that sensitivity has shaped the sort of forms that we use, the container that we cultivate together to support our sitting. God, it's just so natural, to let it evolve. And I mean, Sanbo Zen is a relatively small, though worldwide, organization. But it is, as you said, Karen, has really had a strong influence on Zen in the West, especially perhaps the United States. But we have a number of sanghas in Europe, especially in Germany. Germans seem to really love this practice. I'm getting ready to go over to teach for 4 weeks at this beautiful Zen center in the Black Forest in Bavaria that Joan Rieck, who was one of my teachers and Henry's teachers, Sanbo Zen, heir of Yamada Kon Roshi, and she helped to establish that center. This is another thing that, just thinking of Joan, she was the first opportunity I had to have a woman as a teacher. And I just remember how I was pretty far into practice, and it was the first time that I had the feeling, oh, maybe I could do this. Just to see a woman doing it and hear her voice, her way, which was gentler, very clear, very precise, but certainly a different quality of power. And there are many women, and among the Sanbo Zen teachers. I don't know the exact percentage, but when we gather, it's more like 50-50. We gather annually for a week of intensive teacher training. These teachers from all over the world, with Yamada Rion Roshi guiding us. And it's just, everything is welcome there too. I mean, he is a taskmaster, but he loves the variety of what people bring, So that has also changed. I've been working with him in those annual meetings since 2003. And the first year that he did it, I think he himself was unsure about whether this would be good to do a kind of, gather these students who had all, senior students had completed at least one time this whole koan curriculum, which generally takes about 10 years once you get started. Unless somebody has really luck going to mini session a year, then you can move along. But there we all were, and he wasn't sure that it would be healthy to sit around a table and talk about the koans together. He was a little cautious, though it had been going on with the first generation before I'm in the second generation. And so those first few years felt pretty severe with that. And there was more of a sense of a textbook response to each koan. I think he wanted us to be sure that we clearly received from him what he received from his father. Mm-hmm. And now we gather for these and we're working hard, but there's so much laughter and ease. And somebody will come up with a presentation for a koan that he's never seen before, and he's delighted, even if it's kind of crazy. And this freedom has evolved.
I imagine it's so cool being around that table, seeing all these different expressions and such. And also, when you're speaking of sitting with Joe and Rick, and just you've sat both as a colleague and as a student with different Sanbo teachers. So I'm just thinking, it seems to me there's no substitute for seeing the variety of ways that people personalize.
Yes.
And then as a teacher, you've gotten to see how students personalize in a variety of ways.
Oh, Kieran, that's such a joy. Just to see how this shows up in our humanity. That I think the last thing you said, what it's like to face students, which I kind of do all day. Many online, which is this amazing new resource, relatively new still the way we practice. So I work with students all over the world. And of course we're, most of them are doing koans, and so it's right to that. But what comes to me is just their humanity, the variety and beauty and how it shows up in each one. Yeah. And then when I think about the teachers, I know we're chatting about what should we talk about, and you came up with one question, which is, what do you love about Sanbo Zen? And I mean, gratitude just wells up for the tradition, the practice, what's been handed down, all the way back. Shakyamuni Buddha, Dogen, all these masters. But then the living teachers that I've had such a privilege to know, that's, I just feel that it's shot through with love. So it sounds a little too colloquial to say, what do I love about it? It just is love.
Right, not hard to love it then.
No, it's not hard to love it. Like water and water.
So Sanbo Zen, or formerly Sanbo Kyodan, and you've said Sanbo means three treasures. So would you say a bit about what those three treasures are and why Sanbo, puts them at the forefront?
Yeah, I sort of glossed over that, but this is the heart of this tradition, this practice, these three treasures, which are named Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. And Buddha, of course, the first treasure, is the historical Buddha, Shakyamuni Buddha, who, left his life in the palace, this thoroughly protected setting, and went out into the world to resolve suffering, because he had been taken out of the palace gates with his charioteer and seen, illness, old age, and death, and realized that happens to all of us. And so he became, he left everything, became a severe ascetic practice. And after 6 years, he realized he was about to die. The images of that historical Buddha sometimes are just utterly emaciated, sitting. So he, received some nourishment, bathed in the river, and the tradition has it sat down under the Bodhi tree, determined not to unfold his legs until he awakened. And as the story goes, one morning just before dawn, his gaze sort of lifted, and the light of his eyes met the light of the morning star. And suddenly just one shining. And that we call the origin point. It's so beautiful, this zero, infinite, empty. So Buddha, but Buddha also just means awake, So it's actually what each of us is, this treasure. Not only each of us, but everywhere you turn. This fundamentally awake world. What is that? Then the Dharma. The Dharma, again, has these sort of two aspects to it. One, Dharma with a capital D is the teachings. So they come to us through sutras and sastras and on down through our teachers. All of it is the Dharma. But the Dharma with a small d is the 10,000 myriad things. All these Dharmas that are constantly showing us this world, any little bit of it, all of it. So that treasure. And then Sangha. Sangha is the community of practitioners. And that also can start with our community at Mountain Cloud, the wider Sangha of practitioners all around the world, and the Sangha, again, of the 10,000 myriad things. Buddha did say of these three treasures that if you have Sangha, you have all three. So again, the gift of each one's presence, the gift of practicing together, of this support, we're embodying Sangha.
This calls to mind for me in connection with personalization. There's sort of, personalization in my own life. But as soon as I say that word, my own life is made out of everybody I meet. And so it's like, also like the we personalization,
That's right.
Sangha and such like. And, as someone of like a vaguely leftist commitment, like I'm always wanting to do justice to the fact that every, atom of my subjectivity is made out of society and vastitude of societies that surround society, the cosmos. So therefore, I have a personal great interest in what can happen with personalization in collaboration, what happens when people meet and find new possibilities that emerge between them and this sort of thing. So.
And inspire one another, show the way to one another. And of course there's, a whole school and much written about engaged Buddhism. And it, we call it, that phrase has come up, but engagement in the world, which again, I think we each find what calls to us. But I do feel that this practice naturally turns us toward the world.
The fact that Sanbo Zen has a very large number of practitioners who, while giving themselves wholeheartedly to a life of practice, are also Christians, Jews, Muslims, particularly Christians, maybe even particularly Catholics, or preponderance of Catholics, maybe. And my vague impression, never having studied closely, with one of these teachers myself, but my vague impression is that there's a pretty relaxed attitude toward, nobody's trying to make a big project of like making a Christian Zen or a Zen Christianity. In fact, there's a lot of respect for letting them retain their independence, but maybe also inevitably, because this practice is happening in one person, the languages are going to mingle, at least for them, so.
That is certainly true. Yeah, I think Kon Roshi had, among his successors, a number of Catholic priests, sisters. And, that might have been because the word got out. Father LaSalle was working with him early on, and he had people who would come to him. But my own teacher, Ruben, was a Jesuit in Japan, and his, person that was advising him in the Jesuits sort of knew, said, you should go do this. Come with me. And Kon Roshi was so sure about this, not that you're going to, I mean, Zen is transformational, but he thought it would make a Christian a better Christian, or a Jew a better Jew. And he was so open about this that in their session, during the chanting service in the Zendo, he invited the Christian students to go in another room and celebrate the Eucharist. It's just natural to him that you would do this. And he had a lot of respect for other religious traditions. But yeah, there's a lot of resonance between the language of, Jewish and Christian, Sufi spirituality and Zen.
In the case of Christianity in particular, one resonance that I just sort of poetically love, I didn't have much of a religious upbringing whatsoever, but, I grew up in the West, so, Christian imagery is with me, is, this sense of incarnational theology, that this individual man who lives and dies, and has bodily pain and all such, can, without any trouble, be a reflection of the infinite, or be an expression of the infinite.
Yeah.
That has a lot of resonance with, say, the oak tree in the garden, or,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, beautiful. And I also I grew up in a progressive Protestant home, and when I found Zen, might have partially been because Ruben can't but use some Christian language. He's not trying to avoid it. And so it was sort of in the water in a sense. But, this two things just come up. One, it's no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. Ruben, I haven't heard him say that, but it was in a context of a Zen talk, but just this sense of, dying to what you might call your small self, and then embodying the self that you've been describing so beautifully. The other bit that I remember once in session with Ryon Roshi, and have, one of these beautiful opening experiences, And I went into him, and we did the koan, we shared what was going on. And I just grabbed his hands and said, Roshi, it's a resurrection life. Just
Oh, wow,
and
wow,
everything is so new.
wow,
I mean, we
wow.
can't even say moment to moment. It's just this, and you can taste that. You don't have to have some powerful awakening experience, just this now.
It's just the setup. That's the way it is.
Yeah, that's right.